Pleasure is not your enemy. It is the map your own soul drew to lead you back to yourself. James Hillman, the master of soul psychology, used to say with a clarity few dare to teach, "The soul does not seek to be healed, it seeks to be deepened." And the legitimate desire that pulses within you is exactly that, a profound call to your own inner dive. But, unfortunately, you were conditioned to fear pleasure. And so, to protect yourself, you began to repress what is most alive within you. You started to control, to rationalize, to distance yourself from your own vital energy. And without realizing it, you began to fall ill emotionally. That discomfort you feel is the urgent sign that Aphrodite is already acting within you. It is the psychic energy of desire trying to find passage, trying to blossom, even if you still do not have the courage to look at it. Today, you will understand what almost no one had the courage to teach you. You will comprehend why your pleasure does not lie. And why, when you repress your legitimate desire, you are not protecting yourself. You are only postponing your own blossoming. Stay with me until the end. Because what you are about to discover here will not only change how you look at pleasure, it can completely change how you exist within yourself. When we talk about Aphrodite, the first image that comes to many people's minds is that sensual goddess from ancient stories. The deity of romantic love, overwhelming passions, and dramatic relationships. But that is only the surface, almost a caricature. The true Aphrodite, the one who dwells within each of us, is much deeper and more subtle. She is not just about loving someone, she is about the desire to live intensely, to touch the beauty of the world in everything we do. She is the impulse that makes you shiver when listening to a piece of music, that makes your heart race when contemplating a sunset, or even when creating something with your own hands. Aphrodite is, at its core, the energy of the soul asking to bloom. And the most interesting part? She depends on no one. She is born in you. Now, if you stop to think, you will realize how the world was trained to distrust this energy. From an early age, we were taught to be ashamed of pleasure, as if feeling joy, delight, and desire were signs of weakness or sin. Be careful with pleasure, it will lead you astray, they say. As if the problem were feeling too much. But it is precisely here that Hillman invites us to see differently. He shows that pleasure is not the danger. The danger is living anesthetized, disconnected from your own essence. Because when you do not allow the internal Aphrodite to act, life begins to lose color. What was meant to be beauty becomes routine. What was meant to be vibration becomes boredom. And the body starts to demand payment. How many times have you felt that attraction to something or someone that seemed irrational, yet at the same time made you feel alive? I'm not talking here about irresponsibility, but about that vibrant sensation that there is something more pulsing within you. Maybe it was that course that caught your attention, that unexpected trip, that forgotten hobby that nudges you once again. These are small seeds of Aphrodite asking for space to grow. And here the dilemma begins. Listen to that voice or remain inside the comfortable box of what is safe and socially acceptable. The curious thing is that when we ignore those subtle calls, we begin to seek compensations. People who do not live their own desire end up trying to fill the void with excessive food, unnecessary shopping, endless series marathons, and even empty relationships just to feel full for a few hours. But the emptiness remains, waiting patiently to be heard. Because unfulfilled desire does not disappear, it transforms into anxiety, irritability, apathy. And the more time passes, the further the person drifts from themselves. It is not punishment. It is the soul trying to scream where once it only whispered. Now, here is a key point. Living Aphrodite is not living in excess, it is living in presence. It is not about losing yourself in uncontrolled pleasure, but about allowing pleasure to connect you with the present, with the here and now. It is the pleasure of savoring a cup of coffee slowly, of listening to music with attention to each note, of allowing yourself a touch of self-care, a long bath, a walk observing the beauty around. These are small but profound practices that nourish the soul. As Hillman would say, it is not about seeking healing, but about deepening in the experience of being who you are. And if you look around, you will see how most people live trapped in the opposite extreme, trying to control everything, suffocating desire with fear of making mistakes, of being judged, or of losing control. But the real danger lies precisely in not allowing blossoming. Because when Aphrodite finds no space, the soul falls ill with chronic dissatisfaction. And it is here that the next step reveals itself, almost like an even more delicate whisper, almost imperceptible. The body, then, begins to speak what the mind insists on ignoring. The body never lies. While the rational mind tries to give 1,000 explanations, create rules, justify, or repress, the body simply feels. It is the first to notice when something is misaligned, when joy is missing, when legitimate desire is being suffocated. Recurring headaches, muscle tension, fatigue that never goes away, that anxiety that seems to have no reason. Often, they are just the body trying to signal what the soul has known for a long time. It is as if Aphrodite, not being heard in consciousness, began to whisper through biology. And these whispers, when ignored, end up turning into screams. Imagine that sudden urge to dance, to go for a walk without a destination, to paint, to listen to an old song that awakens something inside you. They are small calls that, in the rush of day-to-day life, most people ignore. I don't have time right now. This is silly. I need to be productive. And each time those little urges are silenced, more of the vital energy compresses within us. It is like a plant that keeps being pruned before it can bloom. The problem is that, over time, life becomes dull. Pleasure gives way to obligation, and the spontaneous smile is replaced by an automatic expression of someone who merely survives. Deep desire, not impulsive and uncontrolled desire, but genuine desire, is the psychic map of the soul. It points toward the directions that reconnect us to what makes sense for our being. It is not just sexual desire, as many think when they hear Aphrodite. It is the desire to create, to express, to experience beauty and meaning. It is the desire for a touch of skin, for a sincere embrace, for a lingering gaze. These are small pulses that show there is still life wanting to be lived. And each time you ignore them, you are, in fact, moving away from yourself. Hillman reminds us that the soul wants to deepen in the experience, not merely exist mechanically. And the body is the stage where this depth unfolds. When you start noticing the small signs, that little flutter in the belly, the sparkle in the eyes, the warmth on the skin, you are beginning to decipher the language of your own soul. It is those signs that indicate where your path lies, not the path that others have drawn, but your own. And here enters the key. If legitimate desire is a map, then perhaps the discomfort you feel is not a problem, but an invitation. Now, think about how many times you have felt an internal calling and, even so, retreated. How many opportunities to live more intensely have you let slip because the mind came up with arguments of fear, guilt, or common sense? And what if I told you that every time you suppress those calls, you are delaying your own blossoming? Because Aphrodite will not go away. She simply waits for the moment you decide to listen to her. And the more time passes, the stronger the tension becomes between what you live and what your soul demands. But perhaps the most curious thing of all is that, the harder you resist, the more desire transforms into anxiety, irritability, and emptiness. It is the paradox of unlived desire. It does not disappear, it falls ill. And as the body accumulates these signs, the soul continues whispering, until finally, it reaches the point where it can no longer be ignored. And it is precisely here that we arrive at an internal crossroads. Continue repressing, or finally understand why denying Aphrodite is, in fact, silencing your own soul. Funny how we learn to betray our own soul without even noticing, isn't it? From an early age, we were taught to distrust desire. To believe that feeling too much pleasure is dangerous, that wanting something intensely can lead us down twisted paths. Control yourself, don't exaggerate. That's not a priority right now. How many times have you heard phrases like these? We grow believing that desiring too much is a sign of moral weakness, when, in reality, it is a sign of life pulsing. And thus, we build an internal wall that suffocates Aphrodite before she can even bloom. This repression does not happen all at once. It is subtle, sneaky. First comes guilt. Who am I to want this? Then fear. What if it goes wrong? Soon after, judgment from others. What will they think of me? And finally, social morality. This is not the right thing to do at the moment. When we add it all up, we create an invisible prison where legitimate desire turns into a burden. But the cruelest part is that, even imprisoned, we still feel the vibration wanting to escape. And then the internal conflict begins. Live suffocated or risk being free. Hillman used to say that the soul does not want to be healed, it wants to be deepened. Desire is not something to be controlled, but something to be listened to with presence and discernment. Repression does not resolve. It only postpones. And what is postponed today becomes dissatisfaction tomorrow. It becomes that existential tiredness we can't explain. It becomes lukewarm relationships, work without passion, days that pass without leaving a mark. When Aphrodite is denied, boredom and apathy take its place. And suddenly, without noticing, the person is surviving, but not living. It is at this point that many begin seeking compensations that never work. They try to fill the hole with shopping, food, addictions, empty relationships. They look for outside what could only be resolved within. But the emptiness remains, because the soul knows. It senses that something essential is being denied. And the more one ignores that call, the stronger the feeling that life has lost its sparkle becomes. It is not bad luck, it is not lack of fortune, it is the natural consequence of silencing Aphrodite within us. Now stop and think. How many times have you said no to something that, deep down, your heart was screaming yes to? How many opportunities to live something full have been swallowed by that fear of not being accepted, of being judged, of appearing selfish? How many times have you justified to yourself that it was not the right moment, while time simply passed by? Each no we give to our own legitimate desire is, unknowingly, betraying the purest part of our own soul. And the most ironic thing is that the more we deny this energy, the more it transforms into shadow. A shadow that does not disappear, but begins to leak into other behaviors. Chronic anxiety, irritability for no reason, constant frustration, difficulty finding meaning in little things. It is here that the next layer of this journey appears. We start projecting onto others what we cannot live within ourselves. And thus, we enter a cycle of seeking external validation, believing that what is missing in us can be filled by someone out there. Isn't it curious? Most people spend their lives believing that the void they feel will be filled when they find someone. As if there were a person ready to bring the love, peace, and meaning they have not yet found within themselves. But this search for completeness in another often is nothing more than a reflection of the inner emptiness we ourselves built by repressing our own desire. Jung shows us this masterfully. What we cannot live in ourselves, we project outward. And in this projection, we idealize partners, friends, relationships, which inevitably disappoint us. How many stories have you heard or experienced in which a person gives themselves too much, erases themselves, adapts, does everything to please, and yet still never feels truly loved? It is the cycle of neediness. We give everything expecting, unconsciously, that the other will return to us what we cannot give ourselves. We seek in the love of another the validation we deny to our own pleasure, to our own inner beauty. And when the other fails, because they are human and inevitably fail, the emptiness comes back even greater. It is not rejection. It is projection. This kind of relationship does not arise from abundance, but from lack. And when two lacks meet, they create dependence, not connection. Relationships where there is idolatry, where one lives for the other, where the fear of loss is greater than the freedom to be. Aphrodite, in this dynamic, is not being lived, she is being suffocated. Because she does not want blind adoration, she wants expression. She asks that you bloom from the inside out before trying to find in someone else the missing piece. When you start living Aphrodite fully within yourself, love stops being a desperate need and becomes a natural overflow. You do not look for someone to fill a hole. You share your abundance with those who are also whole. And ironically, that is where true love begins. When neither of the two needs the other to exist, but choose to walk together because each has already learned to bloom alone. Now, imagine what your life would be like if, before expecting someone to see your value, you yourself began to honor your own desire. If, instead of seeking external approval, you began taking small steps to reconnect with what truly makes you vibrate. It does not need to be something grand at first. It can be picking up that forgotten hobby, allowing yourself a moment of beauty each day, listening to your body without guilt. It is in these small gestures that Aphrodite begins to gain space. But the most beautiful and perhaps the most challenging thing is that the more you bloom inside, the more the external world begins to respond differently. Relationships change. Those people who once drained you begin to drift away, and others, more aligned with your new vibration, start to come closer. And it is at this point in the journey that pleasure ceases to be a whim and becomes a portal to deep reconnection. Because the true rebirth of Aphrodite happens right there, in conscious presence, where the soul's beauty finally finds room to breathe. It is here that many get confused. Living pleasure is not losing yourself in excess. It is not about diving into uncontrolled impulses, nor about living seeking new doses of superficial pleasure. The true pleasure that Aphrodite offers is the pleasure of presence. It is that almost sacred sensation of being whole in the now, of savoring life with awareness, of seeing beauty in small details. It is sipping a coffee slowly, paying attention to the aroma, the temperature, the texture. It is listening to a piece of music, feeling each note invade the body. It is the touch of a breeze on the face, the smell of rain, the warmth of the sun on your skin. Simple things. Profound things. The problem is that we were taught to consume pleasure as escape, not as reconnection. We seek quick stimuli, noisy distractions, excess dopamine, and that does not nourish the soul. It just distracts it for a moment. But when you start practicing pleasure as presence, everything changes. It is as if the soul breathes once again. Anxiety diminishes, the mind slows down, the heart finds a lighter rhythm. And Aphrodite finally finds space to bloom, not as something external to be conquered, but as something internal to be experienced. Think of small practices you can incorporate. Preparing a long bath with essential oils and soft music, cultivating a small herb garden on the balcony, painting even without technique, writing your emotions in a beautiful notebook, dancing alone in your room. It does not matter what it is. The important thing is that each act be an invitation for your soul to express itself without hurry, without pressure, without expectation. Hillman would call this the aesthetics of the soul, allowing the beautiful to overflow from within, not out of obligation, but out of surrender. The most curious thing is that, by doing this, you begin to notice something magical. Life gains a new texture. Days cease being only obligations and become living stages where Aphrodite plays all the time. Anxiety, which once screamed, grows silent. The emptiness, which once seemed immense, starts filling naturally. Because conscious pleasure demands nothing more than your permission. And the soul, when it finally finds that space, responds with silent and profound gratitude. Now, notice how most people who suffer most with anxiety, frustration, and chronic emptiness are precisely those who live disconnected from their own pleasure. They run around all day, overload themselves with tasks, do everything for others, and in the end, don't even allow themselves 5 minutes of true presence with themselves. And ironically, the more they do, the more they feel something is missing. It is the cycle of emotional exhaustion that gradually extinguishes the light within. And it is exactly at this point of the journey that Aphrodite's final invitation emerges. A silent yet powerful invitation. Allow yourself to bloom completely. Not only experience pleasure in isolated moments, but integrate pleasure as a state of being, as a daily choice, as a disposition of the soul. Because it is in this internal blossoming that the next step is born, one that transforms pleasure into sovereignty. And it is there that true fullness begins to be revealed. Deep down, all that Aphrodite has been trying to do all this time is simple. Wake you up. Not with shouts, not with demands, but with small touches. A sigh, a shiver, an unease that appears when you least expect it. It is the invitation to finally allow your own desire to bloom. Not the unbridled desire that blinds, but the desire that illuminates. The desire to live with wholeness, with presence, with truth. That kind of pleasure that depends on no one, that asks for no permission, and that needs no explanation to anyone but yourself. Because, you see, the love you sought outside for so long, perhaps it was always just the reflection of the love your own soul asked to receive from you. It is not about finding someone who finally completes what is missing. It is about you filling yourself first, from the inside out, and then sharing that abundance with the world, with whoever is ready to walk by your side. Aphrodite does not want you to obliterate yourself. She wants you to overflow. When you allow this internal blossoming, something curious begins to happen around you. Misaligned relationships naturally drift away. People who once occupied space out of neediness start to disappear. And in their place, new connections emerge, more aligned, lighter, more genuine. Because now, those who approach do not come in search of someone to fill a lack, but rather of someone who has already learned to nourish themselves fully. It is the kind of silent magnetism that requires no effort, only presence. Conscious pleasure, at this stage, is no longer a luxury, it is an act of sovereignty. It is you reclaiming who you have always been, but who may have spent too much time asleep under the expectations of others. It is choosing every single day, not to be a hostage of guilt, of fear, or of the need for approval. It is waking up in the morning and, with small choices, reaffirming that your soul deserves to live what it came to live. No excuses. No justifications. Just because yes. Of course, the world will not always understand. They will call you strange, selfish, insensitive. But those voices do not speak about you. They speak about the discomfort of others when they realize you are no longer available to sustain their imbalance. And here the true test arises. Are you willing to be misunderstood in order to finally be whole? Are you willing to give up superficial acceptance in exchange for an internal peace that is priceless? Because in the end, my dears, your soul already knows the answer. And if you have come this far, if these words still resonate within you, it is because Aphrodite has been calling you for a long time. Your pleasure does not lie. It is the urgent sign that it is time to bloom, to allow your fullness to finally occupy the space that has always been yours by right. Now the choice stands before you. After everything we have discussed, there is no longer any pretending you do not hear the call. Your soul is asking. Your body is speaking. Legitimate pleasure, the one you spent so much time repressing, remains there, waiting for your permission to bloom. The question is simple, and at the same time profound. Are you willing to step out of the cycle of repression and finally claim your own sovereignty? Are you ready to stop trading your peace for fear of what others will think? Are you ready to take the first step, even knowing that not everyone will understand your change? Remember, the world will always try to convince you that conscious pleasure is a risk. But the real risk is spending an entire life suffocating what was born to bloom. Now I want to know from you, which small legitimate desire will you honor starting today? What is the first gesture you can make even today to reconnect your soul with the pleasure of presence? Tell me here in the comments. Let's create this space of courage and blossoming together. And of course, if this content touched you, if it made sense to you, take advantage now. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notifications, because here, we will continue deepening this journey. Together, in the rhythm of your soul. In Aphrodite's time.